we had to open our suitcases, which very often happens. Sometimes they would just say, "Oh, I'll take that one and that one." They'll just pick. Two times when they did things like that, it was my suitcase. That was something. But we joked about it after. See, they must like my suitcase. So somebody said, "Gee, it looks neat anyway. I'm glad they didn't pick mine. My suitcase looks like this." So that was fun anyway. Now from Bangkok, we were going to Hong Kong, and we had to open the suitcase, and had to get on the plane now in order to get to Hong Kong. We got to Hong Kong. We had to open the suitcase. uh, and we had to get on a plane then to get to Hong Kong. And on the plane, we had a lobster dinner. How about that? You don't usually get things like that on an airplane. We got to the hotel. It was very big, very modern, and it was the first time we had ever seen. Now, we talked about it. We thought we were always ahead of the people in all these countries. They were a little bit ahead of us in a lot of things. It was the first time I had ever seen a computer card in place of a door key. Now, we just consider that run of the mill, don't we? But back then and over there, that was the first, and I wrote, that was such a new thing that I wrote this in the book, computer card in place of a door key. Then the next day, we had a buffet breakfast, and I don't know why I wrote this, a crazy big round line. I know they must have gone around the thing a couple, I don't know I don't know why I wrote that. Anyway, I said the hotel was too big and too impersonal. It was so big, they had levels of malls in the hotel. And we went exploring the levels of the malls in the hotel. And then we walked on these streets investigating shops. Now, we were now in Hong Kong. One part of Hong Kong is big. I mean, it's supposedly a city, but it's a country too. Uh, in order to get to Hong Kong from where we were, the hotel we were in, Kowloon, Kowloon, and that was a section of Hong Kong, and you had to take a ferry to get into Hong Kong proper, and the ferry was 30 cents, Hong Kong money. That was first class. And then second class was 20 cents. Because Hong Kong itself is really an island. So in order to get to the main part of Hong Kong, you had to go over this ferry. Now, when we got to Hong Kong, I wrote here, the men went to a Rotary meeting. Women did not go to Rotary in those days. They didn't even go to the meetings. So I said, 5 of us gals went along and had lunch in the hotel coffee shop. All right. It was a rainy day, but not too bad, just slight. They took us to a bus trip to Tiger Balm Garden. You may have heard of Tiger Balm. It's a lotion like that people put on for something. And as a matter of fact, it was about a year ago, they were advertising Tiger Balm. And I got all excited because we had gone to this. We knew it was some kind of a lotion that people put on. And they were selling it over here, this Tiger Balm. But this was a garden which was like more of a, shall I say, rides and all kinds of things you could do it. They called it a garden, but it was very interesting anyway. Then right next to this Tiger Balm garden, there was a beach, and on the beach, the first thing I looked over there and I started to laugh. And Harold said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Look what's on that beach. a McDonald's. The Aberdeen fishing village. The fishermen were famous for living on junks. Now, a junk was a small boat, a wooden boat, a small, and the fishermen would live right on this boat. The fishermen and their families. It was very crowded. Uh, one boat was right next to another one, and they weren't that big for the fisherman and his family to be living on it. Uh, uh, they call them sampans, Sampans. And it's the little three pieces of wood used for transportation. They could get from one boat to another, and also they could um, go from there to a port. They didn't have to stay on the water, but most of the people just lived on the water there, and it was very congested. And you could see congestion and poverty. Then we had to go to this Victoria Peak, and we had to take a tram with a ride up the mountain. uh, and I wrote here, the angle made it appear that the high-rise buildings were leaning. I couldn't remember that. And we had dinner at a restaurant up on the top of a very high-rise building on the top of the mountain. And then we had a bus ride back to the hotel. Now, Kowloon, I said, was part of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a very congested city, but it is modern in a way. The different places up there in different parts, and they give them different names. This one part was new territories, and they had a lease on this part from Hong Kong for 99 years. There were 1.5 million people in these three areas. And there we saw things like typhoon shelters. One thing which made us look at each other, here was this Moghog, or however you say it, Lutheran school for the deaf. Here we see a Lutheran school for the deaf over here in Hong Kong. Anyway, the boundary street was between the new territories and Kowloon, which was part of Hong Kong. Now, in all these places, even in Hong Kong, which is a city, the people go to markets in the morning and the evening. They didn't say why, but I assumed it was because they didn't have refrigeration in their homes. So in order to eat, they would go to markets. The women would go morning and evening. Their clothes, when they wash their clothes. Now, of course, these are all before washers and dryers, you know. So their wash, the way they dried their wash, they had big bamboo poles out of their windows of their homes or their apartments, if that's where they were. And they'd put their clothes, their wet clothing, on these bamboo poles. That's hard to say, bamboo poles. And that's the way they dried their laundry. Because it's so crowded, if it was an apartment, you could have a room, say 12 by 10 feet, and that could be for 10 people. And they were making government resettlement housing for the people, which was a step up from the wooden houses on the hills. That's what I wrote here. They must have told us that. The government resettlement houses were 7 stories tall, no elevators. There were a lot of British factories. So you see, Hong Kong had a lot of the British people. It was mainly British that were there. I never knew all of this history and geography until I went. So if I tell you things that you know, just say, okay. The British factories were there. There were a lot of British factories, and it was the what do I say the local people, not the British people, who were doing all the work, and anything that they were made, they would put into these big warehouses, and the British would tell these local people, go down to such and such, go down to the local people were calling those big warehouses the go downs. The offices were up at the top of these, and the Chinese coolies were doing all the work. It was the first place I ever saw women doing road work. And they were the road workers, and they wore big round hats with ruffles on them. Then the bus took us almost to the Chinese border, and there was barbed wire at the Chinese border. You walked up a steep hill, and you could see the river was the boundary between New Territory and China. I was very close to China there. And that we bought junks for the boys. The junks were those wooden boats, the little wooden boats. One of them was for you, Jim. One of those junks we bought there. And your brothers. That was before we went into Hong Kong Island separately. We shopped in Hong Kong. Things in Hong Kong were very cheap. Lots of people would go over there, men were going there, and they'd have suits made at a fraction of what a suit would cost in the United States. I know my cousin Bob worked for an airline. He worked for United Airlines, and he often had to go to Hong Kong. And he had a suit made over there one time. He had it made one time, when measured and so forth, and the next time he went over, he picked it up, and it was a ridiculous price. They were so cheap. See that? So I did know about that because of my cousin Bob. Now Hong Kong was very, very crowded, and at night went to the Miramar Dinner Theater. And we were served a true Chinese meal there, which was many courses, tiny portions. That seems to be the way they ate over there. You didn't get one big meal. You got little bits of this and that. I like to eat that way. The next day was Sunday, and I think you might know, but wherever we went, Harold and I, when it got to be Saturday, we would try to find out if there was a church we could go to on Sunday. We didn't want to go to one of the temples. We were trying to see was there a Christian church any place. So we looked in the phone book, and in the phone book we saw, we saw Truth Lutheran Church. Well, for us that was perfect. You see, being Lutherans. We said, well, we'll see if we can find it. This was Saturday night. We'll see if we can find Sunday. So we had looked in the phone book, and we saw the phone book. So we saw there was a map. I guess we must have had a map, and we found out where we were in this hotel, and we found out that this church was right on this bus line. So we were very brave. We got on a bus on Sunday morning, and we counted how many streets there were to where this church were, and we got it. We found it. We found it. We got to there. We got off the bus. You had to pull a rope or something to get off a bus. Well, we had those here too. We got there. And we saw there was a church there. We did it right. Well, I started to walk up to the church, and Harold went across the street to take a picture of the church. And when I get there, there's a woman outside, and she's giving church bulletins to people coming up going into the church. And she must have been able to speak some English too. because when we got there, she said, "This service is in Chinese." And we said, "That's all right. We want to come." We were doing everything we could to be. So we went in the church. Well, we got in the church, and all of a sudden, the minister came over to us. People weren't really sitting down, they were kind of milling around. But this minister came over to us. He could speak some English. I wouldn't say he was very good, but he could speak some English. And he welcomed us. He was very pleasant. And he said, "There's a man here who is very fluent in English. He went to school in Canada, so he could speak English very well. And he brought him over to us. And so this man came and he talked with us because he was very versed in English. So he said, "Would you like me to sit with you?" We said, "We'd love that." So he came over and he gave us a Bible in English. He gave us a hymnal in English. Now, see, we were in a Lutheran church. How do things work out for us? I don't know. Anyway, he goes through ready for the service to start, and when this announce a hymn or something, he would show us where it was in the English hymnal, and the same with Bible. When they'd read from the Bible, he would show us where it was in the Bible, and we could follow along, which was wonderful. So anyway, uh, we're singing. All of a sudden, they're singing, and it's a tune we know. And he told us, "What a friend we have in Jesus." Now, that is a song which we know so well by heart, we don't really need a book. But that was what they were singing. Now, here were all these Chinese people singing it in Chinese, and Harold and I were singing it in English. It was a very moving experience. And he sat between us, and he translated the sermon for us because we knew the Bible. He would when they read from the Bible, he told us where it was, what it was in the Bible, and we could follow along in English because we had the Bible there, and they were reading it in Chinese. Maybe 100 or so. It was a big, good congregation. Now he said, "Do you want to take communion?" And we said, "Can we?" "Yes," he said. So fine. This was very, very moving, I'll tell you. We get up to the altar, and we're kneeling at the altar. Uh, and the minister is speaking Chinese, who we have on either side of us. But when he got to us, he said, "This is the blood of Christ. This is the bread, the body of Christ." He said it to us in English. It was very moving, I'll tell you. I mean, because he talked to them in Chinese and he talked to us in English, and that's the way we took communion in this Chinese Hong Kong church. It was really a very. I mean, now, see, we didn't stay with the group. We went to church. I don't know what they had nothing to do. Nothing was scheduled, but we went to church, and I don't know what the rest of the bus load of people did, but we know what we did. And it was a very, very meaningful experience for us. You wouldn't expect to find something like this. I mean, you might have thought maybe it was a Catholic church, but you wouldn't expect to find a Lutheran church. You see, we were there. Everything that happened to us was always, we said, "It's for us." Oh, and since we were on our own, we weren't going to look for a meal or something. We just had a milkshake for lunch. We walked to this Ocean Shopping Center, which was a huge shopping center, 3 stories of shops. Hong Kong is a very big place. So we bought some a pewter bowl for some different people anyway. And we went to a cocktail party that afternoon. No, I guess we were on our own that day. So we went to dinner at the Jade Forest. Now, we couldn't read any menu or anything. We asked the waiter to order a meal for us. Oh, he would know that we're not Chinese. And I said, we had a wonderful meal. We had asparagus and corn soup and pork and pineapple and asparagus and mushrooms. He ordered a wonderful dinner for us. So I guess Harold gave him a good tip. I don't remember that. Then the next was Monday morning. Things are very cheap, as I said, in Hong Kong. And photography stuff is very cheap. Harold bought a new camera. He was always buying new cameras anyway. He bought a new camera there.